My
Okay.
name is Carol Baskin, and this is Cat Chat. And today's guest is Scott Giacoppo. Am I saying that right?
Giacoppo, yep.
Giacoppo. And he works for the Washington Humane Society in Washington, D.C. And I thought you guys would really enjoy hearing his perspective because he's a huge cat lover. He deals with a lot of domestic cat and feral cat issues, and he gets some really interesting calls about wild cats. So tell us a little bit about how you first knew that you were a cat lover.
Well, I think it stems back. I've been in the business for over 20 plus years now, and I think it stems back from when I first started back in the 80s, late 80s, working in an animal shelter. I had never really had the opportunity to interact with cats growing up or anything like that. And working in the shelter, I got a real appreciation for cats. And I lived in an apartment that wouldn't allow dogs, and I adopted my first two cats, and I was forever changed.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting that you would first find your love for cats in a situation where cats are probably their least cat-like. Cats in a shelter are probably a very different animal than cats in your home.
Yeah, they are, and their behaviors really don't show as well in a shelter as they do in a home. But what I found was just looking at them and interacting with them. I hate to say my level of sympathy for them was a lot higher than with other animals, but there was just something about a cat coming into the shelter that was different than a dog. When a dog comes into the shelter, they walk in on their own 4 feet. They go outside. They still get exercise. They have a lot of the similar things that they would get in their home environment. But when cats come in a lot of shelters, basically their feet don't touch the floor. They come in a carrier. They're taken out of that carrier. They're brought into the exam room. They're put on a table. They were examined and vaccinated, and then they were put into a small cage. And I knew that a lot of those cats had known nothing else but their house, where they came from, and they were running up and down the stairs. Their litter box was in the basement. Their food was in the kitchen. They slept on the bed, chased bugs, sat in the windows, did everything that cats do at home. And then to be taken from that world, in most cases it's the only world they know, and then just to be put in a small cage where their litter box is right next to their bed, new food, new smells, new bed, new everything. I think that's really what got me interested in interacting with the cats more than interacting with the dogs.
That is such an amazing insight because I had never thought about the way a cat comes into a shelter. I mean, they come in literally captive with
Yeah.
no sense at all of this being their idea.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And just like dogs, they don't know what's going on. But again, in the case with the dog, they're used to going out for walks and experiencing the world. And the majority of cats that come in were indoor-only cats that had spent years, or if not long, their whole life in that one home. So I think that that's really, really, like I said, that's really what got me going into the world of cats.
Wow. And you said that was back in the 80s. So have you worked in this industry since the 80s?
Yes, I was actually, at the time I was going to school for finance, and I started working at an animal shelter, and nothing after that, nothing else mattered. Finance didn't matter to me, just working in the shelter, and I ended up dropping out of school to start to work in the shelter, and I've never left. I've been in the shelter ever since. That was in Minneapolis I went to school out in Minnesota, and then I moved back to Boston and started working at the Massachusetts Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, the MSPCA, and I worked there for years, 17 plus years, until I came here to the Washington Humane.
You would know better than I would, but I'm thinking that right around the end of the 70s was when the number of animals being killed in shelters had kind of peaked, and then things started changing for the better. You were right there in that transition period. Can you tell us what you think led to that change and your part in it?
Well, I think I did come at a very interesting time. Trap, neuter, and return (TNR) was just really starting to take off. It had been established and started to be utilized a lot. And I think a lot of us back then in the shelter, we were sick of euthanizing cats. I mean, we didn't get those jobs to euthanize animals. And you know, I went there because I loved animals and I wanted to save them and work with them and rescue them and all that heroic stuff that you read about. And I ended up having to go into a room of cats saying, okay, I need to make cage space for 5 new cats. And I had to make those difficult decisions to euthanize cats. And we were just sick of it. And it really bothered us to a point where a lot of people didn't last. And I think that's why some people are surprised when they hear of someone like myself who has made a lifelong career out of this, because you know, one of the first questions I'm asked is, how did you sustain yourself? How did you make it through? And I don't know the answer to that. I never have, and I'm not sure I ever will. But you know, when TNR came around and started taking off in popularity, we saw the opportunity for a light at the end of the tunnel to save more animals, because a lot of those cats that were coming into our shelter were ferals or were offsprings of ferals, and they were, you know, they weren't the friendliest. And when you had to pick between a cat that was hissing and spitting and swatting at you versus a cat that was very calm and came from a household, that cat usually won out. And I hate to speak of it in those terms, but that's the way we used to have to think. And now, you know, now TNR is actually, and I know we'll talk about this in a little bit, but TNR is actually taking another leap forward with including non-feral cats and including socialized community cats. So I think that, you know, as we move forward as an industry, we're able to save more and more lives all the time. And I think that that's one of the things that has kept me going, is the hope that someday something will change and I'll be able to make different decisions.
I would have to think seeing the light at the end of the tunnel is been what has managed to allow you to keep your sanity. I know certainly in our industry where there are so many throwaway tigers and throwaway lions,
Yeah.
it's only because I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I can see the legislation is coming that
Right.
will put an end to that. And so it enables me to make those tough choices of saying, no, your cat can't come here. And I know that if that cat can't come here, it's probably not got a good situation waiting for it.
Yeah, I know. It is tough, and you know, I worked in the shelter for many years, and then I got involved in humane law enforcement, animal cruelty investigations, and I saw a lot of cruelty committed against cats, and I think cats are one of the most victimized animals out there.
You know, you're the second person this week to tell me that, and I'm wondering why that is. Is it because cats don't defend themselves as well as dogs, or?
Well, I think they're an easier target, and I know that, like with prosecutions and so forth, I'm more apt to get a prosecution against someone who committed an act of cruelty on a dog than I am on a cat, depending on the severity of the case. So if I have a really bad case of animal cruelty, not that any are good cases, but you get the reference.
Yeah.
You know, those are the ones that the prosecutors will go after. Whereas if I have an emaciated dog, I'm more apt to get a prosecution for an emaciated dog than I am for an emaciated cat. And
Isn't that interesting?
I don't think cats have really made it that high up on the social ladder yet. And I know that's something we've been talking about for years and years. And I think to a certain degree they've nudged up a little bit, but I don't think they're where they should be.
What do you think that is?
I don't know. I think it's people who either have superstitious beliefs against cats, have never lived with a cat, and don't understand the unique personalities that cats bring. You know, I mean, dogs are man's best friend and all that, and you know, dogs are a little bit more dependent on your relationship in you know, the minds of people. So that when you get a cat, you just put them in your apartment and you don't interact with them. They just are, and that I think is a view that too many people share, and they don't know the benefits of coming home and actually playing and cuddling and seeing a cat get excited that you're home, just like your dogs do. You know, when I come home, I do have 2 dogs, and when I come home every single day from work, it's the greatest thing in the world to them. You know, they're jumping, they're whining, they're rubbing all over the place. They're so excited to see me. But in the mix of it is a couple of my cats, and they're down there too, trying to get in there to say hi to me.
And yet maintain dignity.
Well, yeah, there's that too. You know, but I think a lot of it has to do with the perception of cats and not being as the similar companion as dogs are.
You said you got involved in law enforcement. one of the things that people ask us all the time is, well, that tiger's starving, why can't you just go take it? And in your case, if you see an animal that's starving, you probably can go take it, but it's because of the groundwork that's been laid beforehand saying there are laws that say you can't starve your animals. So have you seen, I'm thinking during your tenure, this is when these laws have actually been put in place.
Yeah, and Washington D.C. has some very unique laws that I never had in Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, we were special state police officers. We had to go through the police academy. We had to adhere to, all the laws around animals were basically property laws. So if I needed to impound an animal or seize an animal, I needed a search warrant, or I needed to show exigent circumstances that that animal would die if I were to leave and to go get a warrant. Here in D.C., we're not commissioned police officers, but there's a law that allows us to impound an animal to protect it from cruelty and harm. So if my officers go out and see an animal like starving, they don't need to go get a search warrant. They can just impound the animal, which is great. And it, it really saves on a lot of administrative work that would make us prove probable cause. We impound the animal first, and then we go back to the owner and give them a chance to prove themselves. But we have the authority to remove the animal right then and there, and we would for virtually any animal, and that would include a large cat.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow,
yeah,
you guys do have some amazing laws.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
I know in a lot of places those laws only apply to domestic pets, and in some states they actually apply to domestic pets and animals you would think of like farmed animals. But this is the first place I've heard of that had laws that actually would apply to the exotic animals as well. So that's great.
And fish. I had never seen an animal cruelty law that protected fish. And so if we went into one of those pet stores that have the fish tanks, or even like a large chain Walmart or Kmart or one of those stores that sell fish, if they have fish tanks in the back that aren't being properly cared for, we could seize them.
Man.
I actually have a couple of fish tanks with some sea fish in it. I've never seen it before, but yeah. Like I said, DC has some very progressive laws for animals. There are felony level penalties as well as misdemeanor penalties. So
I'm kind of curious how Washington D.C. does how they enact laws, because it's my understanding you guys don't have like a representative and a senator in the federal scheme of things, right?
That's correct. We have no federal representation other than Eleanor Norton Holmes, who is has a limited amount of power, but certainly doesn't get votes on main issues like a regular state senator or congressman would. What we do is we do have city council. We have a very active city council that passes all the local laws, and several of those council members are extremely animal friendly. We've actually honored a few of them as humane heroes for the work that they've done, and we've but the unique thing about DC again is that when DC passes a law, there's a committee in Congress that has to sign off on it and send it back approved. So our laws do go through Congress, even though they're not federal laws. They only apply to the district.
Isn't that curious?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it takes a while to navigate and to understand it. I've been here going on 6 years now, and I still have difficulty navigating it at times.
Tell us about your community cats program.
We have a great community cats program. We for the longest time, it's called Catnip, and it's Catnip. It stands for the Cat Neighborhood Pet Cat Partnership Program, and we for the longest time we had these, I don't want to say strict, but we had these guidelines on what would qualify as a cat that could enter into our program. And that was, it was a feral cat, part of a colony, with a managed caregiver who adhered to, feeding schedules and made sure that they kept an eye on the animal at all times. And, it was just standard TNR feral cat management program. But we noticed that, oh, and incidentally, we do the sterilizations for any feral cat in DC for free. There's no charge at any time.
Oh my goodness.
Yep, so we
So there's
vaccinate.
like no voucher program
Nope.
or any hoops anybody has to
Nope.
jump
You
through?
just work with our catnip team, and you schedule an appointment, and we sterilize them, vaccinate them, and ear tip them for you, completely free
Wow.
of charge.
That
Yeah,
is progressive thinking.
it's great. But one of the things we were noticing, and I think it's true of most urban environments and others as well, is that a lot of these cats that we were seeing weren't necessarily feral. They were living in the neighborhoods, and they had multiple caregivers. They were doing fine, and nobody really claimed ownership or responsibility for them, but we had multiple people who were providing care for them. And those were the cats that were picked up as stray. They were brought into the shelter. They were held for, this mandatory 5 to 7 day stray hold. No one claimed them because they weren't owned. Then they were put into the adoption program. Now, these cats were born and raised in the street. They're not used to being indoors. So again, getting back to observing the cat's behavior in the shelter, these cats didn't thrive in a shelter environment. And it took up a lot of cage space for other more adoptable cats. So what ended up happening is these cats would sit around for weeks and weeks and months before getting adopted, or unfortunately getting sick. Because in the shelter the immune system is suppressed, so they're more apt to get sick. And we started taking a look at some of the other places around the country that were doing things a little differently. Jacksonville, San Jose, San Antonio. They were doing things. They were sterilizing these animals and putting them back into their communities. They were community cats. They weren't feral. So we started looking at doing that. We have a lot of field officers who are a little nervous about that. It's like you're putting socialized cats back in the street. Oh my God, they're gonna suffer and die. And it was a big internal controversy because we weren't sure what the outcome of these cats were. We had no caregiver to check back in with. We had to trust the people that were there. And if you pick up a 1 or 2 year old cat that's been living in the street, and he's of adequate weight, he's friendly, and he goes, he's doing fine, someone's caring for him. He's finding sustenance somehow. So we decided to do it, and this was actually a funny story. We had one of our officers trapped a cat, and as he was loading him up into the truck, someone came out of a house and said, "Oh, what are you doing with Freddie? That's I love that cat. I feed him every day." And my officer said, "Gosh, we're just going to feed him. I mean, we're just going to sterilize him, so he can't make babies anymore. He'll be back in a couple of days at most." He said, "Okay, well, I want to make sure you bring him back. He's a good cat. I love him." So we sterilized him, air tipped him, vaccinated the whole 9 yards, brought him back, and as we were unloading, as we were releasing him back into the alleyway, a woman came out of another house saying, "Oh, there's," I forget what she said, but "there's Kitty," and she had a completely different name for him. She had been feeding him as well, and the two never knew that they were feeding this one cat. And this cat had, was living the life of Riley. He was going, in the morning to one house to get 9 lives, and then running over here to get Fancy Feast, and lounging somewhere else and playing. And, so it brought the community even closer together, which was the idea for catnip in the first place. It's a neighborhood partnership program. So our goal was to get the neighborhood to embrace the cats and provide all the resources for those cats as a neighborhood. And so that just spawned our program, and now our numbers are skyrocketing in the numbers of cats that we're picking up, and rather than bringing to the shelter to take up cage space and all that, they're going right to the clinic and they're being sterilized, air tipped, and put right back. So it's reducing shelter intake, reducing shelter euthanasia, increasing the adoptability of the animals that are in the shelter, because now only the real adoptable animals are getting onto the adoption floor, so it's giving them a better chance, and it's reducing the numbers of complaints out there from unwanted behavior, because these are these people who were calling up concerned over the well-being of the animal. Oh, winter is coming, they look cold, and are they going to make it through the winter, and I'm really nervous about the cat, and we're there to help them.
I just love that. I think that is so
Yeah.
wonderful that you've got these people working together, and I can't even imagine how many more lives that must save just from the ones that aren't being born because of the fact that you're out there neutering and spaying.
Right.
Do you, you know, the one thing that I hear, because we fight for these laws all over the place and we weigh in on a lot of times people call us and say, hey, would you give us a letter saying that trap, neuter, return really works? And of course we always do because we are firm believers in it. But the one constant pushback that I hear from people who are opposed to it is that they say that it will cause people who would never take their cat and dump it at a shelter would turn their cat loose in a neighborhood where they felt like somebody else would take care of it. And I'm wondering if you've been doing this long enough to negate that.
Well, we really haven't. I mean, we do talk to people about, you know, responsible pet ownership and, you know, and try and resolve. We have different programs that try to resolve issues that might cause someone to surrender their animals. We have behavior hotlines. We have behaviorists on staff. We offer, if it's not a feral cat where we're doing free sterilization, we offer extremely low-cost sterilization. So we want to work with housing units and so forth. We have a special program called Pets at Home that deals with landlords and housing officials to, you know, make them implement responsible pet policies. So we do everything we can, and to say that the people aren't doing that, they're going to anyway. But I think in my experience as a cruelty investigator, one of the things I've found is that people don't generally people who are actually going to do these things don't make threats. They don't threaten to do something. They don't generally do that. Some do, but you know, if they call a shelter and say, hey, I want to bring my cat in, most of the times those are the people that want to do the right thing because they called in the first place. Now there are plenty of people out there that say, I don't want my cat anymore. Open the door and give them the shoe with the, you know, the shoe in the behind to get out the door. And those are the cats that we don't want in that house anyway. So we would pick that cat up, sterilize him, and you know, we do look to see if the cat has the survival skills to be outside. When someone calls us about a cat, we ask them specific questions. So if someone were to call and say, you know, this cat has been showing up, you know, crying at my door now for the past couple of days, I think it's my neighbors that he gave him the boot, that's criminal abandonment. And we would have an officer go knock on the door and talk to them about that. In a lot of cases, you know, we would just end up with the cat anyway, but we want to make sure that they know what they did was wrong. So when an officer goes out on a call, they'll ask that person specific questions like, how long have you seen the cat? What kind of behavior? Is the cat, you know, scared and trying to get into the home? Those are indications that the cat might have been an indoor cat that got thrown outside. So we don't want to sterilize him and put him back into the street. You know, they might be sick, they might be thin, they might not look to have the survival skills necessary to survive in the street. Those are the cats that we'll take and put into the adoption program. But when we get calls and we talk to people and they say, well, you know, I've been feeding this cat now for about 6 months, and I know my neighbors have too. We go out there, the cat's, you know, healthy, you know, is a good weight, good coat, looking good, but just socialized. We'll sterilize him and put him back, and know that the people in the community will call us if the condition starts to deteriorate, and we will go out and get them.
How do you educate the people, the public, about the programs that you offer? Do you do radio ads, television ads, newspaper?
Social media. We do a lot of social media, and we have door hangers that we put on when we're trapping in a neighborhood. We put door hangers on that explains the program. You know, I think it was Alley Cat Allies did a study on people's attitudes towards feral cats, and over 80% of the people surveyed said that they would rather see the cats stay where they are than be euthanized. And that's a reality in our world, and I don't sugarcoat it. I don't try and, you know, hide it. If we take feral cats off the street, they will die. So when I tell someone that, you know, if you don't mind this cat dying, you know, we have to have a different conversation. And so, you know, that works in a lot of people, and a lot of people it doesn't. Other people like, I don't care, just get the cat off my property. At that point, I give them my officers. I don't deal with it as much as they do, so I'm not going to take credit. But at that point, they would tell them that I'm sorry, the law allows us to leave the cats here. In fact, it mandates that we use TNR. So you don't have an option at this point. I can give you ideas and techniques on how to keep them off of your property, the cat stopper, the scarecrow, critter ritter, all of these different deterrents, but we are not taking these cats in and killing them. They will be sterilized and they will be returned.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's wonderful that you have that that you have the laws behind you to enable you to do that, or to even suggest that that's the better thing to do. I mean, how wonderful is that?
Yeah. We helped write a very comprehensive law back in 2010, and included the district's official policy will be TNR is the preferred way of managing the feral cat issues. Sorry. So it's a good law. It's just a line in the animal laws that say that it would be the preferred method of managing the feral cat population, and we use it. We use it to at every turn.
So the message that I want to be sure gets out to all of the people who are watching this today and the people who will be watching this in the future is that when someone in your state is lobbying for laws that will protect exotic animals or domestic animals, that's when you really need to step up and act.
Yeah.
That's when you need to make a call, get involved, get those laws passed so that people like Scott here can actually make good decisions for the animals based upon the laws that they have to work with.
Yeah, it's amazing how much a simple letter or phone call, or even better yet, a visit to your elected official's office can help animals. People don't see it that way because they think of when they think of helping animals, they think it's always hands-on. But the legislative process is so important to the work we do. In the past several years, so many great laws have been passed to increase the penalties for animal cruelty, protect exotic animals, protect wildlife, protect domestic animals, protect feral cats, make it a very serious crime in the eyes of the courts. And we couldn't do that without for lack of a better term, the average citizen. When I go in to lobby a bill, or when I go in to testify at a hearing, everyone in that room knows what side I'm going to be on.
There's no cliffhanger, huh?
Exactly. It's like, okay, here comes Scott. It's an animal bill. We know what he's going to say. We know where he's going to stand, and hopefully, I'll have some, study or something that will persuade those people on the fence. But if average Joe comes into a hearing and testifies and is a constituent of Representative A, and says, I live in your ward and I deal with, I'll use feral cats as an example. I deal with feral cats and I see how this program helps them. We don't have sickly kittens anymore. We don't have sick cats hanging out. I'm not worried about my kids picking up cats and getting a disease. They're healthy. They're keeping wildlife, issues at bay. And I don't want to see these cats die. I live in your neighborhood, and what that really says to the elected officials is, I vote. And that's that's powerful. That's more powerful than me saying it. They know what I'm going to say. They don't even need me to be there to testify. They could look at a bill and say, okay, the humane world is going to support this, and there's going to be, the sportsmen's group are going to oppose this. It's those people in the middle that we need more than anybody. And the sportsmen's group, to not to go off on a tangent at all, but the sportsmen's, they are extremely effective at getting non-professionals, your average home people, to speak up. And we are too, to a certain degree, but I think you have groups like in Massachusetts, the Trapping Association was an extremely powerful group, and they hardly had any members. It was just that they were able to mobilize a lot better than we were.
And I think it's because they have something to lose in the game, and so they couch it under the auspices of these cats are killing wildlife and we all want to save wildlife. Well, that's not true. They want to shoot the wildlife themselves. They don't want the cats to kill the wildlife. And so that's why they're asking you to come out and protect the wildlife.
Right, exactly. And it's all that, and they also paint us as animal rights extremists, and we'd rather see animals live than people, and this is going to have a negative health effect on humans, and they paint their message, and it's difficult for us to come out of that unless we have your average people standing up saying, no, I'm not an animal rights advocate. I mean, I'm just here to protect animals, and I think it's wrong that animals die in this fashion.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Do you guys have a foster program?
We have a huge foster program. We at any given time we have a couple of hundred animals in foster. I am a foster failure. I don't foster. I have right now I have 6 cats that live with me, and out of the 6, 4 are foster failures. Yeah. But you know who's amazing? My CEO, the president and CEO of Washington Humane Society, Lisa LaFontaine, who actually brought me down here 6 years ago, and we just transformed WHS into what it is today. She's an amazing foster mom. I think she has like 6 or 7 cats in foster right now, and 3 of them have leg injuries. So she has what we're referring to as the hospital ward, and one actually lost a front leg, I think, and the other 2 are in casts. So she has 3 three-legged cats running around her house right now. And they're interacting with the dogs and the cats. It's amazing.
Oh my!
But I love the foster program. I wish I could do it. I just can't. So I let the people with more strength do that. They're stronger than I ever will be. That's for sure. Yeah.
It is hard. We have a foster program here with the Animal Services and with the Tampa Bay Humane Society. And what they do is if kittens come into the shelter or if a pregnant mother comes in and delivers in the shelter, they immediately send the cats over to the Humane Society, who then farms them out to foster homes all over the place. And we've taken in, I think we're on like cat number 70 right now. But our cats are almost always either the moms with kittens or the very tiny neonates that have to be bottle fed every couple of hours.
Yeah, I know those.
You get so attached to them during the 6 to 8 weeks before they're big enough to go get spayed and neutered and put into permanent homes. So it's really hard.
I know. I've seen it, and I see a lot of my colleagues. They foster very successfully, and they're like a revolving door. And it saves lives. So like I said, I wish I could do it. I just don't have the strength to do it. So. But we do have a great program. We have a great foster, and we also have a great rescue program, placement groups. We work with, not only breed specific for dogs, but we do work with several places that take a lot of our cats. We are really looking at any way of getting the cats out of any animal out of our building alive. When we first came down in 2007, the live release rate for the Washington Humane Society was in the mid-20s. Only 26 to 28% of the animals were leaving alive. And we now are celebrating in the high 80s.
Oh my!
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So and
celebrating is the word.
We are, but we still step back and say that's not really where we want to be just yet. We want to be up around 100% of the adoptable animals are getting out alive, and we're pushing for that every single day. And I think the Community Cats program has been a huge instrument in that, because again, as I mentioned before, we're not seeing as many cats come in, or especially stray cats coming in. So it's things like that we're really doing progressive things, as well as things like off-site adoptions. Our social media presence is huge. So we look at it as a complete team effort. Everyone in this organization has a mandate to save lives. and that's, everybody plays a role, from our finance department to our fundraisers to our medical staff to shelter staff, myself as vice president of external affairs. I have a mandate to save lives, and every decision I make and everything I do has to surround that, that one issue is how can what I'm doing today save lives.
What do you see as the things that could help you reach those goals of 100% adoptable animals into homes?
Right now, one of the key things that we're doing is we're about to launch a capital campaign for a new building. We're very limited. We have 2 adoption centers. One is owned by the District of Columbia. It's the DC Animal Care and Control, and it's on New York Ave in Northwest DC, in Northeast DC. It was made in the 50s or 60s as a place, as the Pound, where it was designed to hold animals for their hold period, and if no one claims them, then they're euthanized. So when we started doing adoptions out of it, we quickly grew out of it. So we had to build a what we refer to as our adoption annex. It's almost like a Quonset type facility. But it's a lot nicer than a Quonset hut. It's not. That's the only thing I can compare it to. It's a small building. We have a cat colony room in there that houses 17 cats, and then an additional 10 to 15 dog runs. So we use every office space is jammed with animals and people, and even our mailroom is usually home to an animal or 2. So yeah, and our second adoption center is a small row house in Northwest DC that will hold maybe at most 40 to 50 cats and 10 to 15 dogs. So our goal is to build a premier facility that will be worthy of the programs that we're offering, and it'll be a lot more user friendly. We'll be able to quarantine animals a lot better. We'll be able to house them a lot more friendlier for them. It's just going to be an all around better experience for the animals and for the people. People don't want to come into animal shelters in general. A lot of people feel as though they'll leave depressed. It's so depressing to be at an animal shelter, and to be frank, our facilities can, on the face of them, can really add to that. But we do the best we can at prettying the place up, and the staff that works in those buildings are the key. And we have great customer service, and our staff knows that they have to go that extra yard because of the facility that they're working in. Mm-hmm. When we get a facility to match our customer service, then it's going to be a much different situation. But since a lot of people don't want to come in, we have an adoption, a mobile adoption center that goes out into the community, and we fill it with cats and dogs. And every single weekend, we're out there promoting adoptions and trying to do adoptions. And last week we did either 43 or 47, I forget the number, but we did over 40 adoptions off-site. Which is phenomenal. That's
that
great.
Is.
Yeah. So we have a really aggressive adoption program, offsite adoption, foster, rescue, and breed placement, social media to get the word out. We're just really doing everything we can. And anytime, we never hold to what we're doing as the answer. We're always looking at best practices nationwide. As soon as someone else comes up with something that seems to work, we're on top of it, evaluating, determining whether or not it's something we can do here and how we could implement it here.
Are there trade magazines or conferences for humane societies to get together and share those ideas?
Oh yeah, well, Animal Sheltering Magazine by the Humane Society of the United States is in my opinion, the end all be all for trade publications. I love Animal Sheltering Magazine, and the conferences. Again, HSUS holds the Animal Care Expo every year. In this year, I think it's going to be in Daytona. Last year was in Nashville. So I like to go to those. And also, Alley Cat Allies has a national conference, which is in 2 weeks, and I'm actually speaking at it. I'm really looking forward to that.
Where will that be?
That's here in D.C. on the weekend of the 12th.
Ah, I'm going to be there. I think I'm leaving D.C. on the 8th. Darn.
Oh. Yeah, it starts on the 9th, and it runs the 9th, 10th, and 11th, actually. and I'm speaking on the program that I just described to you.
Well, if you come to the expo in Daytona, be sure and give yourself an extra day and come over and visit us at Big Cat Rescue.
I will. I absolutely will. I'd love to.
Do you ever get calls about wildcats?
Yes, actually, every October we seem to get a mountain lion sighting here in DC, and we've never been able to actually confirm it. Last year, we had a couple of pretty credible sightings in one area, the Glover Park section of DC, and we were actually contacted by a trapper, not a trapper, a tracker. And he came out and tried to, worked with some of my officers to track the animal. Nothing. And then in November they just stopped calling. People just stopped seeing it. So now this year, again, we've gotten some credible sightings, and we still haven't been able to see anything. We set up wildlife cameras, and we set a couple of large have-a-heart traps, which I know wouldn't catch a wild mountain lion if his life depended on it. But we were hoping that maybe he might have been a domestic, if he was out there, that it was a domestic one that had been let go. But we haven't seen any. Wildlife cameras picked up plenty of raccoons and plenty of feral cats that we're now going back to trap and TNR. But that's about it. That's about it.
This has been an ongoing thing, right? That it's always this time of year?
Yeah, every October for the past 4 years we get these calls. Have no idea what it is, but I will say that if it does happen, that we have plans in place to address it. I have had experience over the years where people have called up and said that, oh, there's an alligator in the pond, and we're in Boston and there's no alligators in a pond in Boston, and I drive over in the rescue truck giggling and laughing, saying, this is probably a log that fell into the pond, and we get over there and sure enough someone released an alligator in the pond and we had to deal with it.
Oh man.
And then earlier this year we had sightings of a black bear in DC. And again, we were skeptical until we got there and actually saw him. So we had to capture him and re-release him with the help of the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. We released him out in the woods of Maryland. So now that we have this mountain lion sightings, we have drawn up plans. We've reached out to partners such as yourself. The National Zoo has been very willing to help us in the way that they can help us in providing a temporary holding facility until we can find out where the animal's next stop would be. If he's a wild animal, I would consider him just like any other cat. I don't want to euthanize him. I'll TNR him. I'd be fine with that. They're a little leery of releasing a mountain lion back into the surrounding areas. So I'm not sure what we would do if it were a domestic animal that had been released. Then that would bring on a whole new set of issues and concerns. So we have a somewhat of a plan in place, but unlike the bear, this one is a little bit more challenging.
How do you go about catching a bear?
Well, he was a small black bear cub, and they pose really no threat. Believe it or not, they are afraid of you. So we were able to track him down. And again, I have a strong philosophy that we're not going to touch an animal unless we have a humane plan for it in place before we do anything. And that was frustrating with some of the city officials, because the city officials, we saw the bear, and we hadn't heard yet what we could do with the bear. I was waiting to hear back from the state of Maryland on a release. And so when we had the opportunity to dart him, I told my officers not to take the shot. And he continued to run, and we had to move the entire command center, so to speak, the perimeter, down the street a half a mile, because that's where he was running to. So we had to keep chasing him on my order, because we had no way of, we didn't know what we were going to do once we darted him. I have, in my opinion, obviously it's biased, but nevertheless, the best animal control team in the country. I mean, these guys are just phenomenal, and they're all highly trained at chemical immobilization. We have all all great equipment, top of the line equipment, top of the line training. I just love my field team so much. And so when we did hear back from Maryland that it was a go that we could release him, that's when I told my guys to go ahead and take the shot, and we darted him, chased him around, and were able to successfully capture him. So he was running around in a neighborhood in D.C., felt a sting in his behind, and woke up in the woods, 100 miles away.
Thinking he dreamt the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. So that turned out very well, and on all fronts. I have an obligation as head of animal control to protect public safety. But I also view it as my obligation to protect animals, and that's a tough balancing act at times. If this bear were posing a threat, I would probably have had to allow the local police department to use lethal force, and that was my concern with the mountain lion, is that these animals have a bad reputation of being aggressive, of being dangerous animals. And in my eyes, I'm telling everyone I can see, is like, you're lucky if you ever see this animal. Just don't corner him, which you never will. He's not going to pose a threat. But even the phrase, I tried to make it sound a little softer by using phrases like puma, cougar, things like that. But it was a mountain lion. And the residents and the officials of DC will not tolerate a mountain lion in the city. So if I got to him first, we would have been able to do the whole humane thing. But I'm willing to bet if he had been spotted in a neighborhood and police responded first, that he probably would have been shot. Unfortunately. Now, that's not to say anything negative. I do want to say not to say anything negative to the Metropolitan Police Department. They are very animal friendly. I teach at their academy on canine awareness, how to read body language of dogs, so they have a use of force continuum for dogs. Rather than just seeing a dog growling, in the past they might have shot him. Now they understand canine behavior, and every single recruit class goes through that before they graduate. And our chief, Kathy Lanier, who is just phenomenal, is an avid animal lover, and she actually does dog rescue. But I think the balance, as I was saying, the balance between public safety and animal safety is a delicate one, and it's hard to juggle at times. But I knew with that bear, I come from New England. I've been camping in New Hampshire, and I've seen black bear before. I know that they're going to run away from you if given the option. So, and me and one of my other officers, who also is an outdoorsman, hiker and camper and all that, we were just casually walking towards the bear, and everyone else was screaming, and the police had their high-powered weapons, and they're calling over the microphone for people to go into their house and lock the doors, and me and this officer were just chuckling, saying, if people only really understood that this animal is more afraid of you, and he doesn't want to have anything to do with any of us. He's just looking for a way out right now.
A large number of my family are in law enforcement, and I think they often get a horrible rap in cases where mountain lions especially have been shot by police officers on the scene, because they have that same dilemma. They have to weigh between taking the shot when they have it, or some child being killed at a bus stop the next morning because this cat can't fend for itself, which is usually the only time they end up hurting people, is when they are injured or old or something has happened to them. So, and it's never like, we all grew up on Wild Kingdom, where they would show the scene of shooting the dart into the animal and the animal drops over asleep like that. It's
I wish.
It doesn't work that way.
I know, I wish. I tried to chase the bear with the officers. Now, my officers are all in their early 20s, and they're big, strong guys and gals, and they in shape, and they're scaling over fences and all that. And I think those days are a little gone for me, Carol. But I tried to keep up with them, and I was jumping. I climbed up and over the fence, and fell back over, and picked myself up and started running. But it's. Yeah, it's just something that we do everything we can to maintain that balance and to protect that animal, but they don't go down right away. They keep going, and if we lose them, then we have a problem. We have another problem. which is one of our fears with the mountain lion, because if we darted him, he would be running around, with a dart hanging out of him for, God knows how long. And I don't believe that we would have been able to find him unless we had him somehow confined.
Yeah.
So that's what I told my officer. I said, if you see him out in the open, do not take the shot.
Right, because
but if
they can just cover so much terrain in such a short time.
Right, and that's the risk for me and my organization, because if I tell my officers not to take the shot and they see them, don't take the shot, and then someone gets hurt, that comes back on me because I made the decision. And I'm willing to, that's part of my job. That's why I make those decisions, and I have to stand by them and live by them. But I don't believe in my heart of hearts that animal would pose a threat to the public safety, so don't take the shot.
And that's where I fall in on this. It's like there are so many more people that are killed from deer jumping in front of their cars and coming through the windshields than there are from cat attacks. That it's like, oh, for God's sake, let the cougar come back to the Northeast and take care of this other huge problem you have.
Yeah, and we're right now experiencing a big controversy here in D.C. in Rock Creek Park with the deer population. For the first time ever, the National Park Service wants to use lethal means as a way to control the population, and it's a big controversy and all that. And there's a part of me that said, well, if there is a mountain lion, and he goes up into Rock Creek Park, maybe we wouldn't have this issue. And it's a natural predator, Yeah.
It never works when we try to get in there and intervene with nature. It's so perfect on its own.
I know. So, yeah.
Well, Scott, it has been so wonderful getting to know you a little bit better. I knew when I talked to you a couple of weeks ago that you were just going to be a fascinating guest because you have so many aspects of your life that are cat related that I thought people would enjoy. So thank you for coming on with us.
Yeah, and I do want to come down and see you sometime. One of the things that I have not had the pleasure of dealing with in a positive way are large cats. In my career, I've done some circus and zoo inspections. I actually almost seized a dozen tigers one day back in the mid-'90s because they were overheating at a zoo. I'm sorry, at a circus. They were outside, and it was an August day, and they were overheating. And I told the handler that he needed to cool the cats down now, and he called my bluff. And I panicked a little bit because I said to myself, well, if I seize these animals, where am I going to hold them? There was a whole thing, but I was not going to let them perform until they cooled down, and the owner realized that he had to understand where I was, what my authority was in that role. And it ultimately ended up, everything worked out. We were able to cool the cats down. But that's my only experience. So I'm dying to come down and see your place and interact and with you and your staff and, and see what you have over there. I'd love to.
Well, we would love to have you join us here.
Great.
All right. Well, that's been Cat Chat, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And this episode will go live shortly. It is posted at catchat.com. You can download past episodes and you can see them in video form, or you can subscribe in iTunes to the audio versions as well. Bye.
Thanks, Carol.